Okay, let me try to make better videos. Maybe murder my phone. Thought, since I'm such a terrible salesman, I should try at least. Maybe get better. So this is my first book, Transparent. This is my first book. Um, if I had put it in regular readable, reader-friendly font, it would have been about 800 pages, and I wanted it to be in full color. I insisted that it be in full color, and I discovered along the way that I was like an artist in the meanest sense of the word, fickle and controlling, and I needed absolute creative freedom. And so it was this crazy art piece that took 20 years to make, that I started when I was 9, and it's a mess. But there's some interesting stuff in there. And yeah, it was my good stretch into making things and getting that done. Putting something out there that other people could judge, and trying. And failing, which is, so I don't know, I think I did accomplish my goal. It was on my bucket list just to get it done. It was not, as a book, successful, which was good, I think. I ended up having, well, I'll criticize my own work too harshly. There are some interesting things in there, things that I would save, that I did. And after that, had another book come out. It was a bit of a existential crisis in the limbo. If you read this stuff, you would be familiar with that. So I didn't stop writing. I did eventually, but for a while I just wrote through the madness, and that was what Since was. Since is the cheesiest book, a cheesiest book of poems. On the back, I took a quote from De Profundis. I think it's kind of perfect for this book, even though I'm not a huge Oscar Wilde fan. Though the Ballad of Reading Jail is great. Anyway, the quote is Dixie et salvavi animam meum. I'm probably butchering Latin. I'm not good at Latin. But it means I've spoken, that saved my soul, and or something like that in Latin, however Latin is. Not my native tongue. But I think that there is something to be said about writing through the madness. And I think Transparent addressed that also, that even though I'm striving to make better videos, I hope that's working. Putting the work out there is so much more important than making it exactly perfect for all time. And as a perfectionist, that's very, very hard for me to learn, and going through this wretched book, much like Transparent, was good for me. I hope they do some good for other people if they're interested in exploring that space. And then Panacea, I took off of the market, but you could probably still get a few copies. They are out there. Odd copies exist in the world. And this is a book that I came to write. I was dreaming a lot. I was writing down my dreams, so I just put all of the dreams that I had been having during that time in there. And so it's not strictly a book of poems, like Since is not strictly a book of poems, but I think from Transparent, which included so many different things, I slowly winnowed it down from poems and dreams and rants and notes and things to fewer and fewer things, and here I was down to 2, just poems and dreams, and there are maybe 6 poems in here, and dreams from some number of years, and they're crazy. I so strongly recommend dream journaling and just seeing where you go. I myself go through cycles where if I dream journal for any length of time, I get extreme lucidity, extreme memory, extreme detail, and vividity, if I can say that. And sometimes it's wonderful and sometimes it's horrible. And when it goes to those extremes, I do need to take breaks. And I've been on a long break now, but this is one of those times when I was feeling very strong and could go pretty far into the darkness before I had to quit. Although there is a year-long gap from a nightmare. And so it goes. Next book I wrote was Ziltrion. I didn't really write this, I also took it off the market. A few copies exist among us, but like Panacea, I have mixed feelings about it. It's not that I wouldn't recommend possession of a copy, despite the fact that I pulled it off the market. Hence my I just suck as a salesman. But I was really deprived of a community of women that would have provided me with a really helpful language when it came to trying to talk about some of the things that I was talking about. And so, because I think words are so important, and because I think I poorly worded so many things in Panacea, I decided to take both it and Ziltrion because I featured some of that on Ziltrion. And I just feel like maybe there is a place for them in this world, that we should write a few more books and get a few more things done before I get too self-congratulatory. I mean, Ziltrion, like I said, was just like a greatest hits thing. Just the poems that people seemed to like around me that I read. So I thought, you know, since Transparent was so big, it was so expensive because it was all in color. I could barely afford to make it. It took a long time to make. Then I wanted to make it a little bit more available and a lot less caustic because it's just such a hard book. Straight up, it's a challenge. But I thought, I should wait a few more books before I do that. And then I'd been writing for some plays by this time, and as I said in a previous video, I was asked to write some elemental poems, so I did, and I threw a few poems from Transparent in there, just to kind of fill it out. But also because it fit, it seemed right, and I dedicated it to the women in my life. And then, which is still on the market, and I would recommend. It's kind of a little scientific. I mean, I think it could be equally hated by everyone. Straight up, I think the scientific community would just be furious that I, presume. to talk about these things in the spiritual community might be discussed in my association of science. But maybe it could be a bridge. Who knows? I tried. I really tried. And then I did lunar meditations for Celtic and Norse deities, which is kind of my Clockwork Orange. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Just the worst salesman ever. But I've sold more copies of this than anything else. And I don't actively dislike it. I wrote it a long time ago, and I took it, it's all from Transparent. I began and ended every chapter in Transparent with a meditation to a Celtic or a Norse deity. And with the landscapes of those meditations, I crafted these very blocky digital rendering collages. I don't know. So I'm kind of embarrassed about them now. I would really like to redo the book, frankly. But I tried to make the landscapes of those meditations in the background of the chapter so that they weren't just words on a page. I was just infatuated with the work of Mark C. Danielewski, and I just insisted that going through the book be pictorial, even though it was only words. And that way you could see the chapters a little bit better too, especially with the juggling of chronology. So lunar meditations for Celtic and Norse. I just pulled them out so that if anybody wanted to use them in a circle, they would be available, particularly in the circles that I was in, or the circle that I was in at the time. I ended up writing the rest of the Celtic deities after having left the Celtic women's circle that I was writing them for. But it was over maybe 4 or 5 years that I wrote them, and you know, the early ones were a little rough, and when I revisit them, I think you know, I would do some of them differently, but I talk about things that I would still want to talk about, and some of the descriptors are still really good for me. I could see how, for some circles, some of the meditations could be really helpful. So that exists in the world, if that's anybody's thing. Next one I did was Ursula. I did take a little break and just saved up poems for a while, for a long time. And then for the first time ever in publishing poems, I took some, like, a lot out. Not just a couple that had been in some other books before that were super redundant or talked out. I left a lot out. And I didn't make it strictly chronological, and I made it pretty much just poems, which was new for me. And I'm still a little bit proud of this one. So that also exists in the world. It's hard to describe other than a short book of poems, but I put it up, me drinking water and crying and realizing that I'm not a filmmaker and throwing my phone. So you can have it for free in audio, and if you want to kick me down the whatever it ended up costing for my trouble, that'd be awesome. It's available. Then I put out Tintinabulation, which is also available, and you could probably just, it's almost short enough, you could just write it down and print it out yourself. You're welcome to, but if you, like I said, wanted to kick me down the $10 for the sitting down and crying for 5 hours to write it. That'd be swell. And after all that, I decided, you know, I probably should make a little anthology because that's a chunk. And so I did. It's called Verses. And it has a little bit of everything that you could want. It doesn't have everything that I love of each of the works. There are definitely things in sense and transparent, of course, because it's so big. There are always going to be things that just have to be cut for space. You know, transparent is kind of unwieldy, so it took up a lot of space even in here. Even with how bad some of the early stuff is, it's hard to work with some of the early stuff. But I did want a picture of me from pretty young. Speaking to that, it does have a little bit more than just poetry because it has so much of transparent in it, and because I wanted it to have more of a story than just a spattering of works. So I did cut a lot that if I were to make a best of version for real, I would include. But it's okay. It's alright. It's a rough start. I do recommend that you read it backwards, straight up. And if you do, buy the real version of this, the version that you could buy, and I would guess like $2 or whatever. It has pages that you can write in. Because it is so short, I left the pages behind each page blank so that you could just flip it over and use it as kind of ranting space or dream journal space. Whatever you want to do. If you just want to yell into the void. Have some paper. So those are the things that I have done so far. And I started off with CreateSpace, and they got bought out by Kindle, which is owned by Amazon. And because I insist on the creative freedom that I have enjoyed there, and I haven't found a better platform yet. If somebody knows a better platform, please. But the interface is the devil I know, I guess is the way to say it, and it allows me to do what I have done, so that is what I have done. I want to go back to reading poems.